Get ready for a lineup of cursed object horror stories that'll make you think twice before bringing anything strange into your home. Just like the story you're about to see, where an old mirror starts showing handprints, and even the face of something that was never supposed to be there. But before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any terrifying stories, and tell me in the comments which city or country you're watching from. You could swear that mirror was breathing. I don't know how else to put it. It was like the glass had its own rhythm, a faint fogging that came and went, even when the window was shut and the air still. It stood in the corner of my room, leaning against the wall, an old mirror I'd picked up at a garage sale. The frame was ornate, dark wood, the kind that smelled like something from another time. At first I thought it would be a nice vintage piece to add some character to the place, but over time, I realized there was something about it that didn't quite fit with the rest of the house. A strange energy, like it was sucking in the light and making the room feel heavier. It all started with weird marks appearing on the glass. I'd clean it, wipe it down with the right products, but by the next morning they'd be back. Handprints, some small like a child's, others too long and thin to be human. These weren't the kind of smudges you leave by accident. They were clear, detailed. You could even see the curve of the fingers. And the creepiest part? They only showed up at night. I'd wake up in the morning and there they'd be, cold to the touch like someone had pressed their hands against the mirror just minutes before. I mentioned it to my mom, who lives a few blocks away. She's always had that sharp intuition, the kind that picks up on things you don't even want to hear. When she came over and saw the mirror, she just stared at it for a long moment, frowning. She pulled out her phone and took a picture. At the time, she didn't say anything, but later she sent me the photo. When I opened it, my stomach twisted. In the reflection tucked in the corner, there was a distorted face, almost human, but with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't look like it belonged on anything human. Its skin was grayish, and the edges of its face dissolved like smoke. It wasn't a camera glitch or a shadow. It was there. That same day, my mom insisted we go to Spellbound, a small shop downtown specializing in supernatural items, crystals, occult books, and spiritual protection. The place smelled like incense mixed with old wood, and the lighting was soft, almost like they were avoiding anything too bright. The owner, a woman with long white hair named Marla, greeted us like she'd been expecting us. We told her the story, showed her the photo, and her expression turned so serious it sent a chill down my spine. She said old mirrors, especially those with dense wooden frames, could hold on to energies and, in some cases, act as gateways to other planes. According to her, something had latched onto me through that object. Marla handed me a necklace with a piece of black tourmaline on a simple chain. She said it was a protective stone, capable of blocking negative energy and cutting unwanted spiritual ties. She told me to wear it at all times, at least until the mirror was out of the house. She also suggested I avoid looking into it until I decided what to do. I thought it was overkill, but I followed her advice anyway. For a few days, I avoided going into my room too much. I just passed through quickly, keeping my eyes averted. Then one morning, I decided to hang it in the bathroom, thinking maybe changing its location would shake off that bad feeling. It didn't work. On the third night, I woke up to a loud crack, like something had snapped. I went to the bathroom and found the mirror on the floor, shattered into large, sharp pieces. The frame split in half. The strange thing was, the wall hooks were still intact. It had just fallen on its own. I stood there, staring at the broken glass, and an unexpected feeling washed over me. Relief. It was like the weight I'd been carrying for weeks had shattered along with the mirror. The next day, I put all the pieces in a thick black trash bag and threw it away without looking back. After getting rid of the mirror, I thought everything would go back to normal. And in a way, it did. The nights felt lighter, the house seemed to breathe again. Even the air felt different, less heavy. But over time, curiosity started eating at me. I couldn't just forget what had happened. That photo, the face in the reflection, the handprints, it all kept creeping back into my mind, like something was still pulling me toward understanding. I started researching old mirrors, legends, and stories about them. I found terrifying accounts, people who swore they'd seen figures moving in the glass, objects reflected that weren't actually in the room, others who said they felt a spiritual presence watching from the other side. I also read that in some cultures, mirrors aren't just metaphors, they're actual gateways to other planes, capable of letting things cross over. Every news story I found sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just coincidence. That mirror wasn't just old. It had a purpose or a history I didn't know yet. It was during one of these searches that I found a clue. While digging through old boxes in the garage, I came across an old family photo. In the corner of the room where it was taken, there it was. The same mirror, identical, with the same frame. But the photo was decades old. I recognized some of the faces, and one of them made me pause. The mirror had belonged to a distant relative who died under circumstances no one in the family ever talked about. It was like a forbidden topic. And the worst part? The same uneasy look I had when staring at the mirror was frozen on the faces of the people in the photo. That unsettled me. I started to wonder if the mirror ending up back in the family wasn't just a coincidence. Had it found me? The question wouldn't leave me alone. Even without the mirror in the house, I'd sometimes still feel that old sensation of being watched. A cold prickle on the back of my neck, like someone's gaze was piercing through me. I kept the black tourmaline necklace on at all times, but sometimes it still didn't feel like enough. So I decided to take more drastic action. I looked around and realized I had other old items in the house. A pendulum clock I'd inherited, a tarnished silver picture frame, even a jewelry box with rusted hinges, things that had never bothered me before. But after the mirror, they all carried a new suspicion. I didn't want to risk it. I donated, sold, or threw away everything. I wanted to sever any connection to the past that might bring back that negative energy. Over time, life returned to normal. I started sleeping better, feeling lighter. And yet I still couldn't walk into an antique shop without feeling a twinge of unease. My friends think the story is fascinating. Whenever I tell it, they try to explain it logically, but they also give me that intrigued look, like part of them believes it. I still think about the mirror sometimes, about the expression on that face, the way it seemed to watch me like it was waiting for something. I believe that if I'd kept it in the house, things would have gone far beyond handprints on the glass or strange reflections. Maybe I wouldn't be here telling this story. Maybe I'd be on the other side, trapped in the reflection, waiting for someone to take my place. So if I can give you one piece of advice, it's this. Never underestimate an old object. You don't know where it's been or what it's seen. And if you ever come across a mirror that seems to breathe, don't look at it for too long, because it might be looking back. That was terrifying. What did you think of the story? What score from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion down below. After seeing a demonic face reflected in an antique mirror, it's hard not to wonder what else might be waiting on the other side of the glass. Just like in the next story, where a simple mirror in a child's bedroom reveals something that should never be seen. There's something about certain early mornings that I can't explain. It's not just the silence, not just the darkness. It's a kind of energy in the air, like the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something. When I was a kid, it always happened at 3 in the morning. And the worst part, I couldn't explain what I felt. I just cried non-stop until my mom appeared in my room. I must have been 4, maybe 5. We lived in a modest house in Brunei, on a quiet street lined with tall trees that swayed even when there was no wind. My bedroom was upstairs, and the only window faced the backyard. Inside that room, there was one detail that still sends chills down my spine, just thinking about it. A large mirror with a dark wooden frame, mounted right beside my bed. My mom said it had been there long before we moved in. Almost every night, I'd wake up for no reason. It wasn't a nightmare, not that I remembered, but my body reacted like I was facing something terrible. My eyes would snap open, and the tears would come, with no clear reason. My mom started noticing the pattern, always at 3 a.m. She'd say it was just kid stuff, that I'd grow out of it, but I could tell she was worried. For a while, she stayed up until that hour. She'd sit in the hallway armchair, listening to every sound in the house. When I started crying, she'd come in and hold me, whispering soothing words. I felt safe. Until one of those nights, something different happened. I woke up like always, but this time, I didn't start crying right away. What woke me was a sound, a rhythmic tap, 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 coming from the direction of the window. It wasn't rain, not branches scraping. It was too precise, like someone was tapping the glass with a fingernail, keeping time. The sound came in steady intervals, and with each tap, my body tensed up more. I looked toward the window, but what caught my attention wasn't what was outside. It was the reflection in the mirror. It was positioned so I could see part of the window in it, but the image seemed off. Moonlight streamed through the glass, but in the mirror it was different, dimmer, like the reflected night was darker than the real one. I blinked a few times, trying to make sense of it. That's when I realized I wasn't seeing my face in the reflection. Not from the front, anyway. It was the back of my head, as if I were facing away from the mirror, but I was looking straight at it. It didn't make sense. My heart started racing, and I tried to call for my mom, but my voice wouldn't come out. I kept staring, unable to move. In the reflection, my head was tilted slightly to the side, like it was curious. The worst part? I saw a slow movement, a turning of the head, but I wasn't the one doing it. At that moment, the sound at the window stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it was crushing me. I felt my mom's hand on my shoulder, and when I blinked, the reflection returned to normal. There I was, just a scared kid with a tear-streaked face. She asked if I'd had a nightmare, and I shook my head, but I couldn't explain. She just held me until I fell back asleep. The next morning, sunlight didn't make things better. I avoided looking at the mirror, turning my head every time I passed it. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. It couldn't be real, and yet, I knew it was. That night, I stayed awake as long as I could, listening for the sound at the window. Exhaustion finally won, but just before I drifted off, I noticed something unsettling. The mirror's frame, which I'd always thought was smooth, had small marks, old scratches forming patterns I'd never seen before. And for some reason I was sure they hadn't been there the night before. That was the moment in my childhood when I started to understand that there was something in that house that logic couldn't explain. A dark energy that seemed concentrated in that object. Without realizing it, my relationship with mirrors changed forever. Over the next few days, I did everything I could to avoid that mirror. If I had to walk past it, I kept my eyes on the floor or turned my head. Still, it felt like it was always calling to me, like something behind the glass wanted me to look again. And every time I got close, I felt that uncomfortable sensation, like I was being watched from the inside. My mom noticed I was acting strange. She asked over and over if I was afraid of the dark, if I'd seen a bug or even a shadow at the window. I didn't know how to tell the truth without sounding crazy, so I just said I didn't want to sleep in there. Her response was always the same. It's just a mirror. There's nothing in it that can hurt you. But even she didn't seem to believe her own words. On the third night after it happened, I woke up to the sound again. This time it wasn't at the window. It was inside the room, 3 sharp taps spaced out like someone was knocking on the mirror's glass. My body went cold, and even though I didn't want to, my eyes were drawn to it. The reflection didn't show the room as it was. The walls looked darker, the bed was messed up in a way it wasn't in real life. And there I was again, only closer to the glass, almost pressing my face against it, smiling in a way that wasn't human. I didn't scream. I couldn't. It was like whatever was there drained the sound from my voice. That other me raised its hand and started tapping the glass, repeating the same rhythm I'd heard at the window. My stomach twisted, and a wave of panic hit me so hard I nearly passed out. That's when my mom rushed in. I think she'd heard the sound too. When she turned on the light, the mirror looked normal again, but I didn't. I started shaking and couldn't stop crying. That same night, she decided I'd sleep in her room, and I never spent another night alone in that room. The following weeks were filled with strange events. Objects moved on their own. The house smelled like mildew and rust, and sometimes the mirror reflected the living room, even though it was in my bedroom. My mom tried to ignore it, but one day, while cleaning the frame, she jerked back, startled. She said she'd felt a chill so strong it was like someone had run an icy hand down the back of her neck. Not long after, she made the decision. We were moving, and it happened fast, like we didn't want to give the house time to notice. On the day we left, I remember looking at my room one last time. The mirror was still there, and I swear for a second, I saw the reflection wave at me. Years have passed, but I've never forgotten. When I got older, I started researching mirrors and found stories from different cultures saying they can be portals to other places, other dimensions. Some believe that at night they open and allow something to look back. Since then, I've never had a mirror in my bedroom. It's not superstition, it's self-preservation. I've told this story to friends, and they always react with that mix of curiosity and unease. But deep down, I know no one really understands, unless they've lived it. To this day, when I think about that smile in the glass, I feel the same chill down my spine that I did at 4 years old. And I'm certain of one thing. What I saw that night wasn't my reflection. It was something else, and it knew exactly who I was. Creepy. Some childhood memories never go away, especially when they involve the impossible. But what if the danger isn't inside your house, but inside the car you ride in every single day? The next story shows what happened after a family bought a vehicle that seemed completely harmless. That box shouldn't have been there. I found it in the darkest corner of my grandma's basement, tucked against the damp brick wall, as if someone had stashed it there so no one would ever find it. The strange thing was, I'd been down in that basement hundreds of times since I was a kid, and I'd never seen anything like it before. The box was made of dark wood, covered in odd burn marks, and had an old rusted padlock that looked like it would crumble at the slightest touch. I can't explain why, but the second my eyes landed on it, I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, like someone was watching me from just over my shoulder. I should have ignored it and walked away, but the feeling that it was too important to leave behind kept me rooted in place. As I tried to force the lock open with a piece of wire, the air in the basement grew thick, almost suffocating, as if the space itself had shrunk around me. The smell changed too, from the usual mustiness to something sour and metallic, clinging to the back of my throat. When the lock finally gave way, I didn't hear the sharp click I expected. Instead, a low, muffled sound, like a stifled breath, echoed inside my head. When I lifted the lid, I found a thick, yellowed cloth carefully folded. Nestled inside was a small, oval mirror with an ornate silver frame. But it wasn't beautiful. The silver was tarnished, and the glass seemed alive with dark stains that shifted slowly, like smoke trapped behind the surface. I saw my reflection in it, but it didn't move exactly when I did. There was a slight delay, just enough to send a chill down my spine. I put the mirror back, but I made the mistake of bringing it upstairs to my room. That night, I had my first supernatural experience. I woke up around 3 a.m., certain someone was sitting on the edge of my bed. When I opened my eyes, I saw nothing, but I heard a faint sound, like nails scraping against wood. I looked at my desk, and the mirror was facing me, even though I swore I'd left it with the frame pressed against the wall. My reflection stared back, unmoving, and the dark stain inside the glass seemed larger, pulsing as if it were alive. After that, the strange events started multiplying. I'd walk down the hallway and feel like someone was right behind me watching. Doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered, and an icy chill would sweep through the room even on the hottest days. But the worst was the mirror. No matter where I left it, it always turned up somewhere else. Once I found it in the bathroom, covered in water droplets, even though I'd locked it in my desk drawer. Another time it was on the kitchen table, propped up, and instead of reflecting the room, it showed a narrow, dark hallway I'd never seen before. The spiritual presence inside that thing seemed to grow stronger every day. Sometimes I was sure I saw a figure behind me in the reflection, tall, too thin, with arms that stretched too long, and a face that wasn't quite a face. just a dark blur, with eyes that glowed a sickly silver. Every time I blinked, it vanished. But the negative energy left behind was so thick it clung to my skin, seeping into my bones. I started having nightmares. In them, I walked down an endless hallway lined with mirrors on both sides. But none of them reflected me. Instead, each one showed different scenes. People crying, others trapped in dark rooms, some screaming silently. At the end of the hallway, there was always a closed door, and from the other side came the sound of slow, ragged breathing. Every time I reached for the doorknob, I'd jolt awake, drenched in sweat with a metallic taste in my mouth. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the mirror, shoved it into a box, and drove to a remote field to get rid of it. I buried it as deep as I could and left, feeling an odd sense of relief, like I'd lifted a massive weight off my shoulders. But when I got home, it was sitting on my bed, clean, not a speck of dirt on it. That's when I realized I didn't own the mirror. It owned me. Since then, the presence doesn't hide anymore. I've woken up to find the figure standing at the foot of my bed, motionless, watching me. I've heard my name whispered in the dark, in a raspy voice that seemed to come from inside my own head. I've felt icy fingers brush my shoulder when I was alone. Now, even during the day, I feel like I'm being followed, like something is clinging to my shadow. And the mirror doesn't show me anymore. It shows the room I'm in, but I'm not in it. As if, somehow, I'm no longer part of this world. Scary stuff. Sometimes the problem isn't where you're going. It's what's coming along with you. Just like in the story you're about to watch, where a decorative object found during a home renovation seems to carry something that didn't want to be left behind. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying the stories. So go ahead and drop a like to let YouTube know you want more content like this, and so you don't miss any upcoming horror stories. That day, I was standing in the middle of the kitchen, my hands caked with dust and paint, when I first noticed the vase. It was there, tucked in the corner, as if someone had placed it just to stare me down. An old porcelain vase, heavy, with raised designs of roses and cherubs. It wasn't ugly, but there was something about it that set my teeth on edge. Maybe it was the milky glaze, the way it caught the light at odd angles, or the cherub's eyes, fixed and unblinking, like they were watching my every move. I bent down to pick it up, and that's when I felt it. A chill slithering down my spine, like I'd stepped through a cold spot in the air. At the time, my ex-boyfriend and I were renovating an old apartment he'd inherited from a distant uncle. The kitchen was a disaster. Boxes everywhere, tools scattered, furniture shoved against the walls. Holding the vase, I asked if he wanted me to toss it. He looked at me, dead serious, and said no. "Put it back where it was," he replied. No explanation, and I didn't push. I wiped the rim with a rag and set it on the counter, trying to shake off the unease. But the next day, when I came back to finish painting, the vase wasn't on the counter anymore. It was on the floor, right in the center of the kitchen, as if someone had carefully placed it there. I figured it was his idea of a joke, but he swore he hadn't touched it. We put it back in its spot, but every time we returned to the apartment, there it was, on the floor. Didn't matter the time or day. No signs it had fallen, always perfectly aligned with the tiles. It started to get under my skin. I thought maybe someone was sneaking in to mess with us, so I suggested changing the locks. He agreed, and we installed a heavy-duty deadbolt, the kind that only opens with a code. For a few days, everything was quiet. The vase stayed put like it had accepted the new rules. Then, one morning, we walked in and found it on the floor again. This time, the air was icy, even with sunlight pouring through the window. It wasn't the kind of cold that comes from outside. It was something else, something I couldn't see. Not long after, a new tenant moved in. A guy in his early 30s, friendly, excited to live there. 2 weeks later, he called us, urgent, asking to change the locks again. He was sure someone had been inside while he was at work. Things had been moved. And of course, the vase was sitting in the middle of his living room. When I went over to talk, he looked rattled. He said that ever since the vase appeared, strange things had been happening. First, he'd hear faint voices like children playing, but he could never make out the words. Then cold spots started popping up around the house, especially near the kitchen. The living room door would creak open on its own, slow, like someone was pushing it from the other side. Sometimes, he'd get the creeping feeling of being watched, even when he was alone. As he talked, I couldn't take my eyes off the vase. It seemed brighter than before, and the cherubs' faces now looked almost smug. I tried to rationalize it, but there was no logical explanation. Still, I told myself I wouldn't touch it again. Just the thought of picking it up made my skin crawl, like something inside it was waiting. A few days later, the tenant decided to move out. He said he couldn't handle the weird stuff anymore, that the whole place felt heavy, like it was suffocating him. When we helped him pack, the vase was alone in the center of the room, as if it was the last thing that wanted to leave. My ex and I exchanged a look, and that's when we knew. It was time to get rid of it. We wrapped the vase in a cloth and took it straight to a dumpster at the end of the street. As we tossed it in, I swear the air around me felt lighter. The silence that followed was different, like the house had let out a sigh of relief. Nothing strange happened after that. But even now, the image of that vase still haunts me. Sometimes when I'm alone, I remember the cold that seeped into my fingers when I touched it, the way it seemed to move on its own when no one was looking. I don't know if there was something supernatural about it, or if it was all just coincidence. What I do know is that after that experience, I learned to respect things I don't understand. And most of all, to never underestimate what might be hiding behind something that seems harmless. Whatever was in that vase, I'm certain it didn't want to be alone. And deep down, I hope I never come across anything like it again. Because sometimes all it takes is one ordinary object to open a door to something that should stay locked forever. Creepy, right? What did you think of the story? What score from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion down below. It was supposed to be just one weird night after the break-in, but it turned into the most unsettling night of my life. The house still smelled like adrenaline. The police had just left, and the living room was littered with signs of what had happened. Drawers left open, furniture out of place, and that suffocating feeling that someone had rummaged through your life without permission. My mom, Sarah, insisted we all sleep together in the living room. She said it was for safety, but I knew deep down she just wanted to keep an eye on everyone. My dad, David, locked every window and bolted the front door with 3 turns of the key. We set up a makeshift bed of mattresses and blankets on the floor. My 2 sisters, Emily and Grace, and I huddled near the wall where the huge black mirror hung, the one we'd inherited from a great uncle. I'd always thought that mirror was odd. It didn't reflect like a normal mirror. It seemed to swallow the light around it. But that night, exhausted and with my mind racing, I didn't think much of it. Our family dog, Max, was with us, curled up between me and Emily. He was usually restless, but that night he was especially on edge. Ears perked at every creak in the house. And it wasn't surprising. After a break-in, every noise feels suspicious. The TV stayed on low volume, playing some random show, just to drown out the silence. Around 3 a.m., I woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't a loud noise or a physical touch. It was like something had called to me, but in a way I couldn't explain. When I opened my eyes, I saw Emily was awake too, staring at the ceiling like she'd heard something. Then it came, a moan, but not a normal human sound. It was drawn out, deep, like it came from far away, yet it was right there in the room. It carried a weight, a kind of pain that pressed against my chest. Grace stirred, her eyes snapping open in fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Max started growling, but not at the door or the windows. His eyes were fixed on the black mirror. The growl turned into a bark, like he was facing off against something. With every bark, the mirror seemed to darken. I swear I thought I saw its surface ripple like it was made of water. I got up slowly, trying not to wake my parents, but Emily was already tugging at my arm. "Don't go near it," she hissed, her voice shaking. Grace stood behind me, her eyes locked on the mirror. That's when the moan came again, louder, closer, like it was inside the room with us. We couldn't hold it in and called for our parents. My mom flipped on the light in an instant, asking what was wrong. When we told her, my parents exchanged that look, the one that mixes disbelief and worry. My dad walked over to the mirror, ran his hand over the surface, and said there was nothing there, that we were just imagining things. But Max kept barking and backing away, like he was trying to protect us from something. The night didn't end there. The air grew heavy, like a dark energy had taken over the room. No one could sleep after that. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like we were being watched, and not by anything human. The next day, still trying to make sense of it, I kept thinking about that sound. It wasn't just a moan. There was something in it, a tone of despair that felt like more than physical pain. It was pure, embodied sadness and suffering, impossible to forget. My mom tried to stick to our routine, but it was clear she was unsettled. My dad, though he wouldn't admit it, was tense too. Emily and Grace avoided the mirror, and even Max refused to lie down in the living room like he usually did. Every time I walked in there, I felt a strange chill down my spine, a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. In the days that followed, strange things kept happening. The sound of light footsteps in the house at night, the TV turning on by itself, and whenever we passed through the dark living room, that suffocating feeling that something was watching us from the mirror. The sensation was so intense it made my heart race. Eventually, my parents decided it wasn't worth the risk. Between the trauma of the break-in and these supernatural experiences, they concluded it was time to move. I didn't argue. That place had changed. It wasn't our home anymore. It felt like something had taken over. But even after we left, I couldn't stop thinking about the black mirror. It had been in the house since before I was born, but I'd never paid much attention to it. Now, after what happened, it was impossible to ignore. I started researching mirrors like that and discovered something disturbing. They're known as possible portals to other dimensions, used in ancient rituals to communicate with spiritual entities. When I read that, everything clicked. The moan, Max's behavior, the negative energy. Maybe it had all come from there. And I knew one thing for sure. I never wanted a black mirror in my house again. That was the first time I truly felt that something invisible, something much older than us, could cross into our world. And the worst part? It had been in our house for years, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. After the move, I thought we'd left it all behind. But the truth was, the black mirror was still with me. Not physically, but in my mind. No matter what I did, every time I closed my eyes at night, I remembered the distorted glow of its surface and the sound that seemed to come from within it. At first, I tried to ignore it. We were settling into a new house, trying to adjust, and my parents avoided talking about the old one. But every now and then, Emily or Grace would mention, almost in a whisper, that they dreamed about the moan. My mom would pretend not to hear, and my dad would change the subject immediately. It was like we'd all made an unspoken pact to never bring it up again. But the more I tried to forget, the more curious I became. One night, after everyone was asleep, I went back to my room and opened my laptop. I started searching for any information about black mirrors, old stories, urban legends, accounts of supernatural experiences. I read about people who claimed to see human figures trapped in the reflection, others who went insane after staring into the surface for hours, and even cases of disappearances linked to rituals involving objects like this. That's when I found a detail that made my stomach drop. Many of these mirrors were custom-made for specific families, passed down through generations, carrying not just stories but spiritual marks from everything that had happened around them. A question started pounding in my head. Where exactly had ours come from? The next day, I waited for my dad to leave for work and asked my mom if she knew the mirror's origin. She gave me a strange look, like she was deciding whether or not to tell me. After a few seconds, she sighed and said it had belonged to a relative of my dad's, a man named Harold, who had died mysteriously. No one talked much about him, according to my mom. The mirror had been stored in my grandma's attic for years, until my dad brought it to our living room as a family keepsake after she passed. That left me with a bad feeling, like the pieces were starting to fit together. I found myself wondering what kind of life Harold had led. and if the mirror had anything to do with his death. I couldn't shake the unease. I started asking other relatives, but most of them brushed me off. Then an elderly great-aunt decided to tell me more. She said Harold was obsessed with the occult. He had old books, collected strange objects, and spent entire nights locked in his study. The mirror, she said, was the centerpiece of his experiments. Some people swore they heard voices coming from the room where it was kept, and others claimed they saw him talking to himself, staring into the reflection. The great-aunt told me that before he died, Harold started acting like someone, or something, was watching his every move. He barely slept, had deep dark circles under his eyes, and said he felt a constant spiritual presence in the house. His death was ruled natural, but no one could explain why his body was found standing in front of the mirror, his face frozen in pure terror. After that conversation, I knew I couldn't just leave that thing lying around. I didn't want another family to go through what we had. I went back to the old house under the pretense of picking up some things from the basement. There it was, leaning against the wall, covered in a dusty sheet. Just stepping into the room, I felt the air grow heavier, like the atmosphere was charged with negative energy. I hesitated before pulling off the sheet. When I did, the reflection showed more than just my image. There was something else, a shadow behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. I looked again, and it was still there, motionless, almost pressed against my shoulder. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and my chest felt heavy. Max, who had come with me, started growling again, the same growl from the night of the moan. He backed away, whining, like he wanted me to drop the mirror and leave. I should have listened. Instead, I carefully picked up the mirror and carried it to the trunk of my car. On the drive home, I felt like I wasn't alone. The rearview mirror showed an empty back seat, but every so often I swore I saw a shadow, too fast to focus on. The smell in the car changed, becoming slightly metallic, like old blood. When I got home, I left the mirror in the backyard. I didn't want it crossing the threshold of my new house. For days, I debated what to do. Throw it away? Smash it? Sell it? But everything I'd read said destroying it could release whatever was trapped inside. In the end, I decided to bury it somewhere remote. I drove to an empty lot on the outskirts of town, waited until dark, and started digging. The wind was stronger than usual, and with every shovelful of dirt, I thought I heard a distant whisper. When I placed the mirror in the hole, the glass reflected something that wasn't the sky above me. It was like looking into a narrow, dark corridor that stretched beyond the reach of light. I felt an almost irresistible urge to touch the surface, but I forced myself to drop the shovel and covered it with dirt, not stopping until it was completely buried. I went home exhausted but feeling like I'd done the right thing. Still, in the nights that followed, I had strange dreams. In the most recurring one, I was standing in front of the mirror, but it wasn't buried. On the other side, a pale figure with sunken eyes watched me. It didn't move or speak. It just stared, like it had all the time in the world to wait. That's when I realized that even buried, the mirror was still with me in some way. Maybe whatever was in it had never been trapped. Maybe it had just found another way to follow me. It's wild how some things that look harmless end up leaving marks no one can see, but we definitely feel. If you made it all the way here, comment Black Mirror, so I know you stayed with me till the end. Don't forget to subscribe so you can keep following these stories we don't usually have anyone to talk about, but still need to get out of our heads. And of course, hit that like button. If any of these stories made you look twice at the things around your home, then it was already worth it, right? There's another video right here that's going to mess with you even more. Click it and keep going with me over there.